A man who spent 30 years building a trucking company found out through a garage intercom that his own son had already picked out which of his tools to sell before the funeral. Not after. Before. My name is Walt Pruitt. I'm 62 years old. And up until about 5 months ago, I thought I understood exactly what my family thought of me. I was wrong. And I found that out flat on my back in a hospital bed, too weak to hold my own coffee mug, listening through a baby monitor to my own son and daughter deciding whether keeping me alive was worth the paperwork. Let me start from the beginning. I run Pruitt Freight Lines out of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Started it in 1994, with one used Kenworth and a handshake deal, hauling grain to a co-op 40 minutes down the road. 31 years later, I've got 14 trucks, a small yard off Highway 30, and 11 drivers who've been with me long enough to know my birthday. I never planned on being a father twice over, not the way it happened. My first wife passed when our son Cole was 6. I raised him alone for 4 years before I met Renee. She had a daughter, Paige, from her first marriage, 5 years old at the time, quiet kid, always drawing in a notebook. I didn't marry Renee to get a daughter. But I got one anyway, and I never once treated Paige like she was anything less than mine. 22 years now. 22 years of being her dad in every way that matters, except the one the county clerk put on a piece of paper. I taught Paige how to check oil before I taught her how to drive, because I told her a woman who can't check her own oil is at the mercy of whoever she asks. I sat in the front row of every art show she ever had, even the ones in a middle school cafeteria with bad lighting and a card table for snacks. When she wanted to go to design school out in Chicago, I didn't blink. Co-signed the private loan because her scholarship didn't cover the last $14,000 a year, and Renee's income alone wasn't going to swing it. Paid down 2 years of it myself before Paige even landed her first job. Cole's a different story, and I say that with more patience than I feel some days. Boy's 34 now, works dispatch for my own company, which I gave him not because he'd earned it yet, but because I wanted him to earn it eventually. Pays himself out of company funds a salary that, if I'm honest, is about $8,000 a year higher than the job's actually worth. I told myself I was building him up. Turns out I was just building him a hammock. Welcome to the channel, by the way, if this is your first time hearing one of these. Hit that like button, and while you're at it, drop a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from tonight. I read every single one. All right, back to it. Now, here's something you need to understand about me before we go any further. I'm not a man who cries easy. 31 years of hauling freight through Iowa ice storms and Nebraska heat waves will scrape the softness off just about anybody. But I had one soft spot, one thing in this world that belonged only to me. A 1967 Chevrolet C10 pickup, dark forest green, original bench seat. I bought the frame off a farmer outside Marion 20 years ago for $800 and a case of good whiskey. Spent 12 years rebuilding it in the barn behind our house, mostly on Sunday afternoons, mostly alone, mostly happy to be alone with something that only answered to me. There's a man in town, Dale Kessler, owns half the storage units in the county, and collects old trucks the way other men collect stamps. Every single year at the Lynn County Fair, Dale finds me by that C10 and makes the same offer. $68,000 cash, Walt. Runs like a top, looks better than the day it rolled off the line. And every year I tell him the same thing. Dale, this one's staying in my barn till they carry me out of it. I meant every word. I remember an evening about 3 years back. Before any of this started, I was out in that barn, running a chamois over the hood, not even cleaning it really, just resting my hands on something I loved. Paige walked in carrying a portfolio case. First big freelance contract she'd landed on her own, a whole rebrand for a regional grocery chain. She spread the mock-ups out across my workbench, practically glowing. Look what I did, Dad. I looked at those designs a long time. Then I looked at her. You built this yourself, I told her. I'm proud of you. And she got that same crooked smile she'd had since she was 5, hugged me around the neck the way she used to when she was little enough for me to lift off the ground. Couldn't have done any of it without you, Dad. Not stepdad, Dad. I stood in that barn after she left, with my hand still resting on the fender of that truck, and felt something I don't let myself feel often. I thought, clear as anything, that's it. That's the whole reason I did any of this. I finally got something right. I thought I had a daughter, not by blood but by choice. Turns out choice runs out fast when the math stops working in somebody's favor. I didn't know that yet, though. Not that evening. I wouldn't know it for another 3 years. Not until I was lying in a hospital bed with a line taped to the back of my hand, listening through a baby monitor to the 2 kids I raised, weighing out whether I was worth the trouble. It started on a Thursday in March. I was out at the yard doing a pre-trip inspection on a trailer, nothing I hadn't done 10,000 times, and my chest just seized. Not pain exactly. More like somebody reached into my ribs and closed a fist around something that wasn't supposed to be squeezed. I remember gripping the trailer hitch so hard my knuckles went white, thinking clear as a bell, this is it. This is how it ends, in a gravel lot off Highway 30. It wasn't the end. Not yet. One of my drivers, a kid named Marcus, found me sitting against the tire and called 911. I was at Mercy Medical inside 20 minutes. Turned out I'd had what they call a silent cardiomyopathy building for years, quiet as a slow leak, and the stress finally forced the issue. The ER doctor, young guy, didn't sugarcoat anything. Mr. Pruitt, your heart's function has dropped to a point where we need to talk about a transplant evaluation, not just medication. I'm going to be straight with you. The program that gives you the best shot isn't here in Cedar Rapids. It's at the University Hospital in Iowa City. And even then, the wait list moves on need and on funding secured up front, not just paperwork. Renee was in the room the whole time, gripping my hand so tight it left marks. When the doctor stepped out, she leaned over the rail, eyes wet, and said exactly what I needed to hear. Whatever this costs, Walt, we're doing it. I don't care what we have to sell. I believed her completely. The transplant team called 2 days later. A Dr. Okafor, calm voice. No wasted words. Mr. Pruitt, given your numbers, we believe you're a strong candidate, but I need to be honest about the financial reality. To secure your evaluation slot and begin pre-transplant workup ahead of the 6-week backlog, we need $62,000 committed within 72 hours. After that window closes, the next available intake is roughly 2 months out. My local cardiologist had already told me, quiet, almost apologetic, that 2 months might be more time than my heart actually had left at this rate. 72 hours. $62,000. Renee squeezed my hand that night in the vinyl hospital chair, looking more tired than I'd seen her look in 22 years of marriage. I'll go to the credit union first thing tomorrow, she said. We'll take out a home equity line against the house. It'll clear in time. I promise you, Walt. I promise. Funny thing about a promise. It's only as good as the person keeping it when they think nobody's listening. They discharged me home for 2 days of monitored rest before the transfer to Iowa City. Set me up in the downstairs den since the stairs were too much, oxygen concentrator humming next to the recliner, and Renee put a baby monitor on the side table so I could call for anything without needing to shout through the whole house. That first evening home I was weaker than I expected, throat dry as chalk from the oxygen line and 2 days of hospital air. I just needed water. I could hear voices drifting in from the kitchen, low and easy, Renee, Cole, Paige, the 3 of them eating dinner together, a sound that used to be the best noise in my world. I reached for the monitor, thumb hovering over the talk button, red light blinking, ready. Just ask for water, Walt. Simple as that. And that's when I heard Cole's voice come through, sharper than I'd ever heard him talk about me before. Mom, we can't put a HELOC on this house for a maybe. My finger froze an inch above the button, not pressing down yet. Dad's 62, Cole went on, and I heard a fork click against a plate, casual as talking about the weather. What if the transplant doesn't happen in time and he doesn't make it? You're stuck with a mortgaged house and Paige and I end up covering you for the rest of your life. My hand pulled back on its own, some old instinct kicking in before my mind caught up. Don't press it. Listen. Paige's voice came in next, and something in me actually hoped, right up until she opened her mouth, that she'd push back. Cole's right, though, she said. It's harsh, but it's just math, Mom. 62 grand on a maybe transplant at his age. Dad's had a good run. He wouldn't want you going broke chasing a long shot. I sat there with the oxygen hissing soft against my cheek, hand frozen a few inches from a button that would have let them know I was awake, that I could hear every word. I didn't press it. Not yet. Let's see how far this goes. Downstairs, dinner kept moving along like it was any other Thursday. Like I wasn't 20 feet away, dying of thirst and something worse than thirst. Cole set his fork down, and I heard him take the kind of breath a man takes before he says something he's been sitting on a while. Besides, Cole said, let's be real. I want you to sit with that phrase the way I had to. Besides, let's be real. I sat with it for 3 full seconds before he finished the thought, and in those 3 seconds I made a decision that changed the rest of my life. I kept listening. Dad barely goes out to that barn anymore anyway, Cole said, chair creaking like he was leaning back, getting comfortable, settling into a point he'd clearly rehearsed. And that dispatch job, he still thinks he's doing me a favor letting me run it my own way. I've basically been running the whole operation for 2 years. If something happens to him, I'm taking over the company either way. Why would I fight him on the truck or the collateral now? A corpse doesn't care what happens to his own business. A corpse. That's what I was to him. Not a father. A liability with a heartbeat he was already planning around. Paige actually laughed, that same easy laugh I used to hear across my workbench when I taught her how to strip wire without nicking the copper. Easy, Cole, she said. He's not gone yet. Yeah, Cole said, but he's not exactly getting healthier either, is he? I want to tell you I felt rage. Rage would have been simple, something I could work with. What I actually felt was colder than that, a kind of clean stillness, like watching an X-ray confirm something you already suspected. Then Renee's voice, quiet, wavering. I know, she said. The doctor said there's no guarantee the transplant even takes. If I risk this house and lose him anyway, I've got nothing left for you two. You two, not your father. Not even Walt. You two, like I was already a line item in a budget she was drafting in her head. Exactly, Cole said. Warm now. Reassuring. The voice of a man closing a deal. We're just looking out for you, Mom. That's what family does. Family. I lay there with a line taped under my nose and listened to my own family redefine that word in real time. Right under the roof, I'd put a new layer of shingles on with my own hands 4 summers back. I never touched that button. Not once. I let my hand drop back to the blanket and just listened, because somewhere in that stillness I understood something. If I spoke up now, they'd apologize. They'd backpedal. They'd smooth it over so fast I'd never actually know what they believed when they thought no one could hear them. So I let them finish. Every ugly word of it, while my throat scraped dry against my own spit. About an hour later, a full hour, nobody having once thought to check on the man who'd had a cardiac event 3 days prior, I heard footsteps coming down the hall. Slow, tired. Renee. She sat on the edge of the recliner, brushed my hair back the way she used to when we were newlyweds and I'd come home wrecked off a double haul. For 1 second I let myself believe the last hour hadn't happened. Did you get the loan started? I asked, voice cracked, barely a whisper. She looked me dead in the eye. The credit union said the equity line won't clear in time, honey, she said. It's out of our hands. Out of our hands. I nodded. Didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't ask a single one of the 400 questions sitting right behind my teeth. I just nodded like a man accepting a weather report and let her think she'd gotten away clean. She kissed my forehead, told me to rest, and walked back down the hall. I heard the TV click on in the living room, heard the ordinary sounds of an ordinary evening in a house where a man in the den had just been quietly sentenced to a maybe. Still no water. Nobody ever brought me that water. I want you to understand something about me, because it matters for what comes next. I don't move on feelings in the moment. 31 years running a freight company teaches you that the man who panics is the man who gets somebody killed on a wet highway. You wait. You assess. You act once, decisively, when you're sure. I waited until midnight. Renee was asleep beside the recliner in the guest chair, soft and even breathing, the sleep of a woman who'd made peace with her decision hours earlier. I picked up my phone, hands still weak, still shaking a little from the medication and the exhaustion and everything underneath it. Scrolled to a name I hadn't texted in almost a year. Dale Kessler. I typed slow, one thumb in the dark. Me. Dale. The C10. Is 68 still good? His answer came back in under 3 minutes. Man sleeps with his phone on the nightstand like a teenager. Dale. For that truck. Always. What's going on, Walt? Me. Need it gone by tomorrow afternoon. Cashier's check. I'll explain later. Dale, say less. I'll have the trailer there by 2. 12 years of my life in that frame. Rebuilt engine, hand-stitched bench seat, 4 coats of paint to get that exact shade of forest green. And I let it go in about the time it takes to boil an egg. Because somewhere between that monitor and that lie, I stopped being a sentimental man and became a practical one. Practical men don't beg for their own lives. They pay for them. The next morning I told Renee I needed the house quiet to rest. She had errands to run for Cole anyway, something about picking up a part for his truck. For once, timing worked in my favor instead of against it. At 2 o'clock sharp, I heard the low diesel growl of Dale's trailer pull into the drive. I was sitting on the porch in a folding chair, oxygen tank at my side, watching through eyes that felt heavier than they should have at 62. Dale got out first, big man, gray beard, the kind of handshake that could crack a walnut. He took one look at me, pale, tubing under my nose, moving slow, and his easy grin faded a little. Walt, what happened to you? I didn't have an answer for him. You sure about this, buddy? He asked, quiet, just between us. Never been more sure of anything, Dale, I said. His guys backed the trailer up careful and slow, like they were handling something alive, and winched my C10 up onto those ramps. 12 years of Sunday afternoons rolling away down the driveway, and I felt something I didn't expect. Not grief. Clarity. Cold, clean clarity. Dale walked over and pressed a cashier's check into my hand for $70,000 even, $2,000 over his usual number, which I never asked for and won't forget. Get better, Walt, he said. She'll be waiting in my barn if you ever want her back. I won't, I told him, but it was kind of him to say. Iowa City took less time to live through than it does to explain. Renee drove me down early the next morning, well inside Dr. Okafor's 72-hour window. I checked in with a cashier's check already folded in my jacket pocket and told the intake woman I'd handled the deposit myself. Didn't explain further. Wasn't her business. The evaluation cleared me for the transplant list, and 11 weeks later, a heart became available from a donor family in Des Moines. I will be grateful to for the rest of my life. The surgery went about as well as they come. I don't need to walk you through the recovery room, the tubes, the monitors counting my heartbeat because for a while I couldn't be trusted to do it myself. That's not the story. The story is what happened after I came home. Because I came home a different man. Not broken. Transformed, and I mean that clinically, not poetically. First thing I did, still stiff and sore, barely a week out of the hospital, was open a separate account at a bank across town, redirect my paycheck there, and tell nobody. Renee noticed the joint account sitting flatter than usual inside 2 weeks. I told her it was medical bills clearing. She believed it same as I'd believed her HELOC story 2 months before. Funny how a lie sounds different depending which side of it you're standing on. I want to give you a few small moments from those weeks, because the small ones tell you more truth than the big ones ever do. One evening, still moving slow, I asked Renee to help me read the label on a new prescription bottle, my eyes still adjusting. In a minute, she said, thumb scrolling her phone, texting Cole back about a load he was trying to dispatch. She answered him before she ever got up to help me. A few days later, Cole stopped by, didn't ask how I was feeling, walked straight to the garage, grabbed a torque wrench off my pegboard without asking, and on his way out mentioned the dispatch software needed an upgrade I should pay for. Not once did he ask about the surgery, then the phone call. I was resting in the den, door half open, and heard Renee on the phone with her sister in Waterloo, voice bright with relief. He's doing so much better than we expected, she said. Honestly, I think we dodged a bullet there. She meant it medically. I heard something else entirely. I heard we almost wasted $62,000 on you. 2 months after the surgery, Renee came to me glowing, said she wanted to throw a family dinner to celebrate how far I'd come. A family celebration for the man whose life she'd tried to talk her own children into not funding. I said yes, smiled. Told her it sounded wonderful, because I'd been waiting 2 months for exactly this dinner. The night came. Cole showed up first, already talking about a new load contract before he'd even sat down, hinting he'd need me to raise his dispatch salary once he took on more responsibility. Paige walked in 10 minutes later, didn't say a word about my recovery, didn't glance at the manila folder sitting quiet in my jacket pocket. We sat down to Renee's pot roast, her mother's recipe, the kind of spread that used to mean something in this house. Cole didn't even wait for the plates to get passed. "Before you get comfortable, Dad," he said, reaching for the potatoes without looking up, "the dispatch office needs new routing software, probably 6 grand. Company should cover it, but you'd need to sign off." I set my fork down slow and looked at him. "Is that right?" I said. Quiet. "Yeah, man," Cole said, oblivious. Still reaching. "I've been holding that whole office together for 2 years now, practically running the place myself. Practically running the place. $6,000 from the man who 2 months earlier called me a corpse over a baby monitor because keeping me alive cost too much." I reached into my jacket pocket, hands still a little unsteady, not from nerves, but from a body still healing from a surgery none of them had paid one dime toward. Pulled out that folder and set it on the table between the pot roast and the potatoes. Cole stopped mid-sentence about the routing software. Paige's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Renee's smile started to falter, some old instinct in her finally recognizing the shape of what was coming. I opened that folder slow, no drama in my hands, no shake that wasn't already there from the surgery. Just a man laying cards on a table he'd been dealt months ago and had only now decided to play. "Cole, Paige, you two were deeply concerned about your mother's future. If my transplant didn't work out, you called my life a maybe not worth the risk, so I liquidated the one thing in this world that belonged only to me to cover that deposit myself. I never touched a dime of your mother's equity." I set the first document down, the bill of sale, title transfer, my 1967 Chevrolet, signed over to Dale Kessler, dated the day after that baby monitor conversation. Cole stared at it like it was written in a language he didn't speak. "Wait," he said, laughing wrong, thin. "You sold the truck? That's crazy. You loved that thing." "I did," I said. "But it seemed like a fair trade. My life for a truck. Pretty good deal, don't you think?" Nobody answered that. I turned to Cole next, pulled the second document. "Since I'm apparently such a high risk to keep around, I had a conversation with the company's accountant and our attorney. Effective this week, your dispatch salary drops back to what the role actually pays on the open market, which is about what you were earning before I started padding it 8 years ago. And the succession plan I had drafted naming you sole heir to the company, I tore that up and had a new one written. It's a 50-50 split between you and Paige now, with a neutral trustee overseeing operations until you've both proven you can run it without me propping it up." Cole's face went the color of old drywall. "You can't do that," he said, voice cracking, and for 1 second I saw the 10-year-old kid again, the one who used to ride shotgun with me on Saturday hauls just to feel important. "That's my future." "No, Cole," I said, keeping my voice level because I'd promised myself I would. "That was my company. You just managed a piece of it. And 2 months ago, over a baby monitor, you told your mother I wasn't worth protecting. So I stopped protecting your piece of it." Paige had gone very quiet, watching all this with the stillness of somebody realizing the storm hadn't reached her yet, but it was coming. I pulled the third document. Let her name sit a second before I said it. "Paige, the loan I've still been paying down on your behalf, the $14,000 left on your design school balance, I've reassigned full repayment to you as of the 1st of next month. I love you enough to have helped you get where you're going. I don't love you enough to keep footing a bill for someone who thought I was a bad investment." Paige's mouth opened. Nothing came out at first. Then, "That's not fair. That debt has nothing to do with any of this." "It has everything to do with it," I said. "I decide where my money goes based on who I trust to have my back. You told your mother it was just math. Well, this is just math too. I want you to know I never raised my voice through any of it. Not once. 31 years hauling freight teaches a man the loudest voice in the room usually loses the argument." Cole was the first to explode, chair scraping back hard enough to nearly tip. "This is insane," he said, face red. "This is family. You can't blow up two people's whole future over one conversation you weren't even supposed to hear." "I heard everything, Cole," I said, quiet even. "I heard you calculate my death like I was a bad load contract. I heard you call my life a maybe. And I heard your mother agree with you." "Walt," I panicked, Renee said, hands shaking against the edge of the table. The boys were in my ear. The doctors kept throwing numbers at me. I was trying to protect everyone. "Don't," I said, and something in my tone cut her voice off mid-breath. "Don't dress up a lie as protection. You made your position clear 2 months ago. You just didn't have the nerve to say it to my face. You set it into a baby monitor, then lied to me an hour later while I was still lying there waiting on a glass of water I never got. Paige slammed her palm flat on the table, rattling the potatoes. You're not even my real father, she shouted. You just married my mom. You don't get to act like you raised me. There it is. 22 years boiled down to one sentence, right at the end, right when it mattered least and hurt the most. I didn't flinch. I looked her dead in the eye, the same way her mother had looked into mine the night she lied about the credit union. I raised you from the time you were 5 years old, I said. I paid for design school out of my own paycheck. I sat through every art show in every bad-lit cafeteria in this county. I gave you my name in every way that matters because I thought you were my daughter. I paused, let the silence stretch long enough to hurt. But you taught me a business lesson through that monitor, Paige. Never keep funding an asset that's already written you off. My investment in both of you ended the night. You calculated my death over dinner. Nobody said a word for a long moment, just the hum of the furnace and the smell of pot roast going cold on 3 untouched plates. I stood up, carried my own plate to the kitchen like it was any other night, same as the Thursday they'd sat at that table deciding my life wasn't worth the risk. Behind me, I heard the panic set in. Mom, do something, Cole said. He can't do this. Paige's voice cracked, high and desperate now, all that confidence gone. We're your kids. We were just trying to protect you. Protect her. That's the word he reached for. Not protect me. Not once in 2 months had either of them used that word about me. Renee broke down at the table the way she does, hands over her face, shoulders shaking. I stood in the kitchen doorway and watched her a moment. 22 years of marriage sitting right there in front of me, dissolving into a puddle of regret. Walt, please, she said, please reconsider. They're scared, I'm scared, we didn't mean it that way. You lied to me while I was lying there begging for a chance to live, I said. I'll keep the lights on in this house and food in that fridge, because I made a vow in front of God 22 years ago, and I intend to keep that part of it. But as far as a marriage goes, you lost your husband in that recliner the night you told me the credit union turned us down. You just didn't know it yet. Cole and Paige left within the hour, didn't say goodbye. Cole peeled out of the driveway fast enough to spray gravel across the flower bed Renee plants every spring. Paige walked to her car slow, dazed. A woman who genuinely believed right up until dessert that this dinner was going to end with a check for new routing software instead of a torn-up succession plan. Renee sat alone at that table a long time. I know because I watched her from the hallway, staring at cold pot roast and 3 photocopied documents, finally understanding that protecting her kids' comfort had cost her every ounce of trust that used to live in this house. I went upstairs that night, not to our bedroom, the one with the baby monitor still sitting on the side table, the same little speaker that let me hear exactly who my family really was. I made up the guest bed instead, slow, methodical, the way I do most things now. Renee found me there a couple hours later, stood in the doorway. What are you doing? She asked. I'm not sleeping in that room anymore, I said, not looking up. Can't lie there and stare at that ceiling, remembering what I heard while I was fighting to breathe underneath it. Walt, please. You made a choice, Renee, I said. I'm not punishing you. I'm adjusting my expectations. You protected your investment 2 months ago. I'm protecting mine now. From here on out, this is a business arrangement. Roof, bills, groceries, nothing more. I zipped my bag, set it by the closet, and closed the door before she could say anything else. It's been a little over 2 months since that dinner. Cole's dispatch salary is what it should have been all along. And last I heard, he picked up a second job on weekends running deliveries for a produce distributor to cover the gap. Called me once, left a voicemail asking if we could talk man to man. Haven't called him back yet. Maybe I will. Paige is paying down her own loan now, month by month, no help from me. A neighbor told Renee she picked up freelance work on the side to cover it. First time in her life she's had to budget for herself instead of leaning on mine. Funny how fast a person finds motivation once the safety net gets pulled out from under them. Renee and I still live in the same house, still eat at the same table most nights, mostly in silence. She does the laundry. I pay the bills. Some mornings I catch her looking at me like she's trying to find the man who used to reach for her hand across that table. Some mornings I let her look a beat too long before I get up and start my coffee. I haven't decided yet if there's a version of husband left in me for her. Maybe there is. Maybe there isn't. That's a conversation for another day, and I'm not in a hurry to have it. The barn's empty now. No green fender under a canvas cover. No more Sunday mornings with a socket wrench in my hand. Some nights, I still walk out there anyway, flip on the light, stand in the empty space where that truck used to sit. I don't regret selling her, not for 1 second. But I won't pretend the quiet in that barn doesn't sit heavy on me some nights. They say forgiveness is the mark of a strong man. I've heard preachers say it, read it stitched onto pillows in gift shops, watched enough sermons to know it's supposed to be the answer. But I learned something different in that hospital bed in Iowa City. Tubes in my arm, a machine counting my heartbeat for me because for a while I couldn't be trusted to count it myself. I learned a man who forgives too fast is just teaching people how to hurt him again. I didn't leave my family that night at the dinner table. They left me first, through a baby monitor on a Thursday evening in March, while I lay in that den too weak to reach for a button. I just finally caught up to where they'd already gone. You should have just brought me that glass of water. That's all I asked for that night. Never got it. But I got everything else back, and that turned out to be worth a whole lot more than $62,000 ever could. If this one hit home for you, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me down in the comments where you're listening from tonight. I'll see you on the next one.